Before I show how to use the Snowflake Copilot, I'll quickly go over its timeline and development. A demo of Copilot was shown in July of 2023 during the annual Snowflake Summit conference. 4 months later, during Snow Day 2023, it was announced that Copilot was in private preview. 5 months later, it moved to public preview, and 3 months later, it became available to everyone. From its inception, Copilot has been hosted inside Snowflake's secure layer for LLMs, so your data and metadata remains within its governance boundary, ensuring that nothing is exposed externally. Like any chatbot, Copilot needs a model to interpret natural language prompts, and rather than reinventing the wheel, they chose to use a state-of-the-art LLM from a company backed by Microsoft. As part of its agentic flow, technology from a company that Snowflake acquired is called to retrieve and incorporate domain-specific data. When a user makes a SQL generation request or asks about the structure of their data, metadata is searched and fed to the LLM. Based on its expertise from processing over 5 billion SQL queries every day, Snowflake built its own SQL generation model, tuned for its data platform. Copilot can also access its extensive documentation to respond to questions about its platform's features and SQL syntax. Now I'll show how to use Copilot. When you're in a SQL worksheet, hover over this tab in the bottom right corner and click the speech bubble icon. The first thing you'll want to do is set the context. Copilot fully respects role-based access control and provides suggestions based only on the data a user can access, ensuring data is not disclosed inappropriately. Click Select Database at the bottom of the screen. To avoid showing proprietary metadata today, I'm going to select the Snowflake database and the account usage schema. We'll start off by using Copilot as a learning tool. The first question I'll ask is, what are the main SQL differences between Snowflake and Oracle? Copilot returns several differences and includes a link to the Snowflake documentation page, which provides more details. Next, I'll ask a syntax question. How can I display yesterday's date in MMDDYY format? Copilot describes the syntax and shows me an example of its usage. You can click the Run button to see the result of its example query. Users new to Snowflake often have questions about its security features. For example, when you're using Snowflake, you have an active primary role, which determines whether you have the necessary privileges to perform certain SQL actions. If several roles have been granted to you, you can switch between them so that your primary role gives you the privileges you require. Secondary roles enable you to perform SQL actions using the combined privileges of all roles granted to you. So I'm going to ask Copilot, what command will enable my session to use all roles that have been granted to me in addition to the primary role? Copilot explains the Use Secondary Roles All command and provides a document link for further reference. Here's an example of when you know some Snowflake concepts, but you need help putting them together. How can I use the Grants to Users view and the Current User function to see which active roles have been granted to me? And Copilot generates a SQL query to answer my question. Copilot can answer questions about your database objects, so it's important to give them meaningful names, types, and descriptions. Here I'll ask for information about the most useful views in the schema that I selected earlier. And Copilot returns a nice summary. Here's an example of when you know about a certain attribute, but you can't remember its name or source. Which column can tell me how many bytes were spilled to object storage when compute's local disk was not large enough to handle a query's spillage needs? Copilot gives me the correct column and table names. At any time, you can clear the Copilot window by clicking the Start New Chat option at the top. Now I'll show an extended conversation with several follow-up questions. Which view enables me to see the compute credits charged to a specific user? Copilot suggests the Query Attribution History view. So I'll ask for a description of its columns. Copilot shows me the column names, types, and comments. I'll follow up with, which view enables me to see the compute credits used by specific virtual warehouses? Copilot suggests the Warehouse Metering History view. And now for the payoff. How can I use the Query Attribution History and Warehouse Metering History views together to attribute warehouse compute costs to each user of a specific warehouse for last month? And Copilot returns a complex SQL query which properly answers my question. At any time, you can change the context of your questions, like I'm doing here by selecting a different schema. After generating a SQL query, Copilot can refine it on the fly. I'm going to ask it for a SQL query without specifying any database object names. For each account name, calculate the total dollar amount charged for compute usage during April 2025. After it generates the initial query, I'll ask for a refinement. Use the ratio to report function to add a % of total column. Then I'll ask for one more tweak. Sort the results by highest percentage. Great, this query fits the bill. Finally, I'll show an example of where I'm having trouble joining two queries to get valid calculations. How can I combine the two queries below so that the result set shows account 1, cost 2, and the absolute difference between cost 1 and cost 2? Rather than using a simple join, Copilot recommends using two named subqueries and then joins the temporary views, giving me just what I need. However, the query is a bit complex, so I'll ask Copilot to add comments at the top. Perfect. Now the query is documented for future use. I hope you'll give Snowflake Copilot a try. It really can help democratize insights and enhance productivity.